Can you build a peer-to-peer network using nothing more than DOS, a pair of old PCs and Token Ring? That's exactly what I'm going to try out today with Novell 7 and its built-in Personal NetWare. Let's talk about legacy network technology. I'm the vintage collector and these are my stories. Novell DOS began life as DR-DOS, developed by Gary Kildall's Digital Research. DR-DOS, as we explored in an earlier two-part series, is a direct descendant of CP/M, the control program for microcomputers, the de facto standard operating system of the 70s. Novell had specific reasons for acquiring Digital Research and DR-DOS. Although it was already best known for NetWare and dominated the network operating system market, Microsoft was becoming an increasingly serious competitor in networking as well. Novell was also trying to expand beyond its strength in networking. After acquiring Digital Research, it went on to acquire the Unix system laboratories, WordPerfect and Quattro Pro, assembling operating systems and desktop applications that could form a broader counterweight to Microsoft. And by bundling NetWare Lite with some editions of DR-DOS 6, Novell could also compete with emerging peer-to-peer networking products such as Artisoft's LANtastic and Microsoft's Windows for Workgroups. NetWare Lite did not require a dedicated central server. Each machine on the network could share its own drives and printers. But NetWare Lite was fundamentally different from Novell's full NetWare architecture and couldn't connect to true NetWare servers. So Novell developed a substantially improved successor called Personal NetWare. Like NetWare Lite, it could operate as a straightforward peer-to-peer network, while its revised client architecture would also support existing Novell NetWare servers. And while my 486 is busy installing a full copy of Novell 7 along with Personal NetWare, I was investigating something else. Apparently, Novell customers had asked for a way to install Personal NetWare without also installing Novell 7. In response, Novell released D72PNW, a disk creation utility that extracts the Personal NetWare files from the Novell 7 installation disks and creates a separate installable disk set. I'm going to give that a try later when we return to the IBM PS1 model 2011. But before that, we're going back to the 486, which has now completed the installation of Novell 7. At this point, there's still no Personal NetWare in sight. To enable it, I have to start setup again and head to the networking menu. From here, the first step is to select the network adapter. As you may remember from our previous episode, this machine has both an Ethernet and a Token Ring adapter. Today, I'll be using Token Ring, but Personal NetWare apparently does not include a driver for the IBM Turbo Token Ring adapter. By selecting the OEM option, additional drivers can be installed, although you have to specify their exact location on the disk yourself. At first, that appeared to work, but after the next reboot, I was greeted by this error message. Stepping through the network commands manually revealed the problem. The driver I had installed was not compatible with the bundled version of LSL, the link support layer. Now, while the network driver handles the network adapter and the Token Ring data link layer on OSI layer 2, LSL itself acts as the common interface, connecting that driver to protocols such as IPX and SPX on OSI layers 3 and 4 respectively. As a separate, independent component, LSL is also easily replaceable. That is why many network adapter vendors included a copy of LSL.com on their driver disks, allowing an existing installation to be updated with a version tested alongside their driver. Unfortunately, the IBM Turbo 16.4 driver disk did not include LSL. So I shamelessly borrowed a newer copy from the Realtek Ethernet driver disk, and that brought me one step further. The driver now loaded, but it still failed during the token ring insertion process because the machine was not yet physically connected to the network. Moving over to my retro museum, I installed the standalone version of Personal NetWare on this IBM PS1 model 2011. I pointed the installer to a directory on the hard drive containing the appropriate network drivers for the Xircom pocket token ring adapter we explored in the previous episode. You also have to provide a username for the machine, basically anything that makes sense to you, and decide whether it should share its resources. We'll come back to that later. After the obligatory reboot, I realized that the network stack had not loaded, even though it had definitely been added to c:/autoexec.bat. Now, that is a peculiarity of the PS1 model 2011. It starts DOS from ROM and, by default, uses the startup files stored on the ROM drive, D:. Bear with me, because all of this is in German. This machine has a fully localized ROM, so even the customized program used to change the CMOS settings is localized. What I'm doing here is telling the machine to start its integrated ROM DOS, but skip the ROM copies of config.sys and autoexec.bat and instead read them from drive C. I then modified autoexec.bat to temporarily skip loading the network stack because I suspected it might run into the same kind of issues as seen on the 486, where the link support layer, LSL, initially failed to load. And I was right. After running the commands one by one, VLM complained that the last drive was not set correctly, so I first had to add the appropriate setting to config.sys. The next time I ran the startnet batch file directly to load everything at once. But that ultimately failed with an out-of-memory error. The problem was that setup could no longer start to complete the initial network configuration. And no wonder, at this point only a meager 260 kilobytes of conventional memory remained free. That was a very typical problem at the time, because loading a complete network stack could consume a substantial amount of conventional memory. My IBM PS1 model 2011 makes this especially difficult. First, it has only 1 MB of RAM. Second, it runs PC-DOS4, which offers very limited built-in help with memory management. And third, as a 286-based system, it cannot use EMM386, so there's no straightforward way to create upper memory blocks and load parts of the network stack high. Of course, I could replace the DOS installation on drive C with something more capable. I could also install a third-party memory manager. Some tools even claim to provide UMBs on certain 286 systems. Or I could try Beyond, a utility I explored some time ago, which takes a rather unusual approach to breaking the conventional memory barrier. But that's not the point here. For this demonstration, I deliberately decided to work with what was given, so you can experience the same pain I did. Now, paying close attention to the starter messages, we can see that Personal NetWare loads DPMS, the DOS Protected Mode services. But it fails because no XMS driver is installed. Consequently, NWCACHE, which loads afterwards, also complains that it's running without the memory manager. Fair enough, a 286 can easily be given XMS support using HIMEM.SYS. Although PC-DOS4 does not include it by default, you can borrow a copy from a contemporary version of Windows or directly from Novell 7. Either one works. The problem is that even with HIMEM.SYS loaded, PC-DOS4 cannot relocate itself into the high memory area, nor can it load drivers and TSRs into upper memory blocks by itself. So immediately after startup, I had only 525 kilobytes of free conventional memory, and the network stack was not even loaded yet. Once again, the first time setup failed with an out-of-memory error. Still, adding HIMEM.SYS had already improved the situation considerably. NWCACHE could now relocate its cache buffers into extended memory, increasing the free conventional memory after loading the network from around 260 to 340 kilobytes. But that was still not enough. For reasons unknown to me, the config.sys and autoexec.bat files were also a little bit strange. Both contained a line for loading the Swiss German keyboard driver, exactly as they did in the original ROM copies. Why IBM configured it this way, I have no idea. Loading the keyboard map from autoexec.bat after already loading it through an install line in config.sys does not make much sense. But in an attempt to save a little more memory, I disabled the line in config.sys and moved StartNet to the beginning of autoexec.bat before even loading the keyboard driver. And that brought me one step further. Instead of immediately failing on the command line, setup actually started, only to display the same out-of-memory error again. Okay, I get it, I need to free up even more RAM. Ultimately, I also disabled NLS Func and temporarily removed display.sys, which left me with about 360 kilobytes of free conventional memory. But apparently even that was still not enough for setup.
Have you tried disabling server in startnet.bat?
No, because I actually wanted the server running so this machine could share its resources. But eventually I temporarily removed share from startnet.bat just to recover a few more precious bytes. And that finally did the trick. The first time setup completed and rewrote startnet.bat afterwards anyway. So the big question was, would everything still run after restoring display.sys and country.sys? Apparently not. With only 357 kilobytes free, there was no longer enough conventional memory to start the net utility. So the choice was simple. Either leave display.sys and country.sys disabled or disable the file sharing server.
Or try memory managed like HIMEM.
Right, but not today. As far as Personal NetWare is concerned, it initially allows empty passwords. I quickly changed that and also adjusted the resource sharing. I restricted access to the default share for drive C, then added a separate data share pointing to C:\data with broader permissions. Because that is the basic idea of a peer-to-peer network. Every PC can act both as a client and a server. And while a peer-to-peer network does not require a dedicated server, nothing stops you from designating one machine to host most of the shared files centrally. That was exactly what I had in mind for the 486. At least I did not have to repeat all the memory management struggles here. On a 386 or later, memory managers such as EMM386 can use the processor's paging hardware to provide upper memory blocks, making it much easier to keep the network stack out of conventional memory. From workgroup administration, I created a new share for the software library, then mapped it as drive O on the IBM PS1. Because of the limited free conventional memory on the 286, I could not run a newer version of Norton Commander with a metered transfer display. The older Norton Commander 3.0 did run, but I had to calculate the effective throughput myself. Transferring 2,093,978 bytes took almost exactly 1 minute. First, I multiplied the number of bytes by 8 to convert it into bits. Then I divided that by 60 seconds, which gave roughly 279,000 bits per second or 279 kilobits per second. Converting that back into bytes gives about 34,900 bytes per second or roughly 34.1 kilobytes per second. So that is approximately the transfer speed you can expect from the PS1 Model 11 using the parallel port token ring adapter. Of course, this is not an exact benchmark, but it is good enough as an indication. Personal NetWare naturally includes a variety of tools, most are provided by the net command. There's diagnostics, which can basically send out the number of packets and see how many are returned. There's even live monitoring in various flavors, also including the server console, which shows live activity of logged-in users. Compared to its bigger brethren, Personal NetWare does not provide centralized user administration or the more advanced management features available in the fully featured Novell NetWare. But it was still a solid starting point for building a small workgroup network and, in my experience, was not particularly difficult to install. Plus, it provided full integration support for Microsoft Windows. What about you? Did you ever use Personal NetWare back in the day or another workgroup network solution? Share your experience in the comments below. And if you like to see more such retro explorations, hit the subscribe button and consider becoming a channel member. I'm the Vintage Collector and this was my story for today. Thanks for watching and see you again next Sunday.